Hello everybody, welcome to the video. My channel name is College Football Frenzy, and today I'm going to be talking about my conference rankings for the 2020 season. These are only the preseason rankings, they can change, but I'm ranking how I think conferences will be, and just in terms of skill-wise, how good their recruiting classes are, overall how good they are in the rankings, just the best conferences in all of college football. I'm going to rank from the worst conference to the best. Obviously, these are the FBS conferences. The Power 5 are up there on the screen right now, but I'm going to go 10 through 1. And as we know, for college football fans, I'm not too sure why, but for college football fans, pretty much every fan, especially of the bigger conferences, roots for their conference during bowl season and, the out of conference first few weeks of the season. Now, it is weird because obviously, sometimes people are rooting for their rivals to succeed, and it doesn't make much sense, but it is what it is. Fans will just root for teams inside their conference. It's an interesting thing to see happen, but I decided I would rank from 10 to 1 the conferences, and most people have an idea of probably what the conferences toward the bottom will be, and the conferences toward the top will be, just because every year it's pretty similar. They're just movement around maybe the middle, but I'm gonna get started right away. Start with 10, make my way to 1, and I do like certain conferences better than others. I'm gonna admit it because I'm a fan of a certain team. I do it too sometimes, and I don't even know why I do it. But I'm gonna be as neutral as I can in this. So I'm gonna get started right away. 10, I have the MAC. So listen, nothing against the MAC, but the MAC is just an extremely weak conference. It produces 4 or 5 loss conference champions all the time. Every team in that conference has at least like 4 losses, and that's all those losses. A lot of them are coming from out of conference games. They just don't stack up against other conferences well whatsoever. Their best team last year was Miami of Ohio. I mean, that's just not good. I bet you wouldn't be able to guess what bowl game Miami of Ohio played in. They're just really just the MAC is not a very good conference. It doesn't produce good teams. It's pretty weak, and it's a bunch of teams from like the Ohio area, the Michigan area, even Buffalo area like that, kind of like in the Midwestern area. It's like a smaller version of the Big Ten, a much weaker version of the Big Ten. The best team we've probably seen from the MAC is, I would say, Northern Illinois. They challenge a lot of good teams sometimes, but recently they've been having they haven't been doing very well. But the MAC is a pretty weak conference. There's not many great teams to it. It's just a bunch of teams that are pretty weak. So I put it at 10. They really don't do much during bowl season. They play in the weakest bowl games like the Bahamas Bowl and stuff like that. You really don't see these teams have much success. So I put them at 10, and they don't have great recruiting classes whatsoever. All right, number 9, I have the Sun Belt. So the Sun Belt's famous for having one good team, obviously App State. They're pretty good. Last year they went 13-1. That was pretty good. They finished inside the top 20, I believe, in the AP poll. So it was a great season for the Mountaineers. They won the conference. This upcoming season, I'll imagine they'll just be as good as they were last year. They should be a good football team. But the rest of the conference is pretty weak. Now, I will say there's only 10 teams, so if there were more teams, it would probably help. But there's only 10 teams, and the 10 teams, most of them aren't that good. You look at them, most of them are weak teams that have not done anything really in a long time in college football. They're pretty weak. I know App State, that's probably the most famous one, but most of them are weak teams. Louisiana's also okay. They made it to the conference championship game last year. I think they had a 2 or 3 loss season. So they were an okay team. But besides from that, the Sun Belt's pretty weak. And like I said with the MAC, the Sun Belt really does not have great recruiting classes. It just really cannot produce those. A Conference USA. So I believe this is a 14-team conference. Now this conference has a lot of bad teams. UTEP, UTSA, I believe. I believe this also has Rice. It has a lot of the weaker teams, but recently it's also produced some decent teams. Lane Kiffin led FAU to a good season. He's gone now, but still they had a good season. Louisiana Tech had a pretty good season last year. I think they're going to be pretty good this upcoming season. They ended up winning their bowl game against Miami, shutting the Hurricanes out. overall, the conference, it has a few good teams, in my opinion. It has a few good teams. UAB was okay last year, so I believe the conference definitely has some decent teams at the top. But overall, like the other conferences, it doesn't produce great talent. It has weak recruiting classes, it's not a great conference. The only thing good about it really is that it does have its own television contract, I think, with like NFL Network. But aside from that, doesn't get much national attention. The winner of this conference usually does not go to a big bowl game, so it's a pretty weak conference overall, in my opinion. 7, the Mountain West. Alright, so this is where we're starting to get into conferences that produce ranked teams, pretty good teams. The Mountain West obviously has one team that's just lately has always just been a good team. That's Boise State, obviously. They're pretty much always in the Mountain West Conference Championship. They're always making the big bowl games. We've seen them in the Fiesta Bowl before. We've seen them in the Las Vegas Bowl before. They're a pretty good football team, obviously, year in and year out. They're always known for beating big Power 5 schools. So Boise State definitely helps the conference. Besides from that, you have teams like San Diego State. Last year, they were pretty good on defense. I think they were ranked for 1 or 2 weeks last season, so that was pretty good. Air Force, I believe finished in the top 25. They went 11-2 overall, so that's a pretty good football team right there. And then, of course, you have Fresno State. Fresno State had a bad season last year, but they have had good seasons before. So overall, it produces some pretty good teams. Not great recruiting classes, but it produces schools that are known for being overall, good schools that can make big bowl games, that can beat good teams. So I put the Mountain West at 7. 6, the American Athletic Conference. This is by far, in my opinion, the strongest Power 5 conference. It's down to 11 teams. UConn left. That, in fact, actually makes it stronger. 12 teams with UConn is a lot weaker than 11 teams without UConn, because UConn's not a very good football team. You look at the conference. They have UCF, who has won big bowl games, obviously. They've had undefeated seasons. They have Cincinnati, who was pretty good last year. They had Memphis, who was pretty good last year. They do get decent recruiting classes, not anything special, but at least you can see them in the top 50, so there's something right there. And year in, year out, they're having pretty good New Year's Six Bowl contenders. They're a good conference. They produce good games, even USF, who's not great now, a couple years ago was pretty good. So there's always good teams in that conference, in my opinion. Even Navy, look at them last year. They had a great season. So this conference produces a lot of good teams. A lot of them do go on to win big bowl games. So I have them at 6 right now. I think the conference actually considers themselves as like the 6th power conference. They're not there yet, but they're definitely getting stronger. 5, the Big 12. This might surprise people. I would say before 2019, this would have been the 3rd best conference, but they, in my opinion, are getting weaker and weaker by the minute. It's no surprise to anybody but that the Big 12 has weak defenses. That happens pretty much every year. Since Texas with Mac Brown, since then, the Big 12 has really not had a team that's had great defenses. Maybe you see every season a team like Baylor that has a decent defense, but never a team with an incredible defense. That hurts the conference. Overall, they don't do very well in the postseason. We saw that last year where they only had one bowl win. That was Texas against Utah. The recruiting classes are okay. Texas and Oklahoma are top 10 recruiting classes, but aside from that, not many great teams. And it's only a 10-team conference. It has a lot of weak teams, in my opinion, so I have it at 5 for now. I just don't feel like the conference, can stack up with conferences like the SEC or the Big Ten. Just doesn't have defenses. The offenses are great, but if you don't have a defense, you're not going to win championships. So I have them at 5 right now. 4, the Pac 12. So the Pac 12, I think last year was the 3rd best conference, in my opinion. This year, in my opinion, I think Utah is going to be on a big decline, which I think will hurt the conference. I think Washington will just be about the same as they were last year. Oregon, obviously, will be stronger. USC, I think they're around the same area as they were last year, and Arizona State, I think, improved. So overall, the conference, it's not in too much of a decline, but this is really more because I feel like some other conferences are improving. The Pac-12 has some good teams. It has a playoff contender. I just feel like in the bowl season, I don't feel like this upcoming season, some schools have the talent that's going to be needed, to win those big bowl games. Like, no Pac-12 team has a top 10 recruiting class. And I know Oregon's very talented, but no Pac-12 team has a top 10 recruiting class. So I have them at 4 right now. 3, the ACC. Now, people are going to get very mad at this. People think the ACC is a very weak, conference. And listen, I don't love Clemson. I do not like Clemson. The team I actually like 3 teams. All the teams I like happen to be rivals with Clemson, kind of, or just don't like Clemson. So I don't love Clemson, but I'm going to be honest with you. Clemson helps, how good the conference is, but there's also other good teams. North Carolina should be a ranked team next season. Florida State with Mike Norvell could be pretty good. Those schools are starting to bring in pretty good recruiting classes, and even Virginia Tech, maybe even Miami. So I think that's a pretty good conference overall. And they're also going to have Louisville, and Louisville did pretty well last season, a big improvement. So I think the ACC is actually a pretty good conference. I think it can produce 4 ranked teams maybe next season. I definitely think it'll improve. I'll admit last year it was the weakest Power 5 conference, but this upcoming season, I think the ACC is going to be pretty good. In a few years, I think it's going to have multiple playoff contenders. But right now, you look at it, I think North Carolina could definitely be a top 15 team this upcoming season. And they're getting pretty good recruiting classes. To the Big Ten, no surprise here. Obviously, now you know what number 1 is, but the Big Ten, obviously known as great defenses, some very tough places to play at. It produces pretty good recruiting classes. Ohio State has a great recruiting class for 2021. They're going to have an incredible recruiting class. But overall, pretty good recruiting classes, pretty good defenses. They do okay in bowl season every year. I feel like sometimes they have big wins, sometimes not. They can definitely stack up against the competition. There's a lot of ranked teams that the Big Ten produces every year. I expect Iowa, even losing their key players, to be a ranked team. I expect Penn State definitely be a ranked team. I expect Michigan to be a ranked team. I expect Ohio State to be a ranked team. Even Minnesota and Wisconsin. I think the West is more wide open, but still overall, it's a pretty strong conference. It's got a lot of good teams that can play pretty good football. Number 1, without a doubt. Listen, I'm actually a Big Ten fan. I'm an Ohio State fan overall, so I kind of root for the Big Ten. But I have to be honest with you, the SEC is the best conference right now. That's right now. Maybe halfway through the season, it's not. But for right now, it is the best conference. You look at the recruiting classes inside the top 10 for 24/7 sports. I mean, it's just crazy. Georgia's number 1. Alabama's number 2. LSU's number 4, Texas A&M's number 6, Auburn's 7, Florida's 8, Tennessee's 10, even Arkansas. Arkansas is the 30th best recruiting class. What team can go 2-10 and have the 30th best recruiting class? I mean, that's crazy. I mean, Mississippi State's in the top 30. All these teams, Kentucky, they produce great teams year in, year out in the top 15. It's a very fantastic conference. Obviously, the SEC has a known history of winning championships. It's a good conference. Do they play the best out of conference opponents? Maybe not, but still it's a strong conference with great football teams who have great defenses, some great offenses, great quarterbacks in my opinion. It's a very strong conference. When you go to the SEC championship game, you're expecting, obviously it's a top 4 matchup pretty much every year now. You're either going to get Georgia or Florida from the East, who will be a top 4 team, and then you get like Alabama or LSU or Auburn from the West, who's probably going to be a top 4 team going into it. So you're always going to have a strong championship game, a strong conference overall. It did pretty well in bowl season last year, and it looks like it's going to have another great season. Just overall, so much talent staying, so much talent coming in. The defending national champions, LSU, are from the SEC. But yeah, it's a great conference. Listen, I'm an Ohio State fan. Obviously, we don't like the SEC, but I'm just saying the facts right now. As of now, the SEC is the best football conference going into 2020. Just great recruiting classes, great old talent, and great coaches. I mean, the SEC West alone, you have Mike Leach, Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron. I can keep going on. I mean, it's just stacked. Gus Malzahn, and in the East, you got guys like, Smart, and you have Mullen. So overall, great conference. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you for joining in. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and check out all my other videos. And leave your comments down below for who you think is the best conference.